Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and we are back. Yes, Weather Center Nazario is back in business for a video update as of today. We haven't done a segment in a little while. It feels like forever at this point, but we are back, and thank you so much for taking some time out of your Wednesday to join me today. I have great news from the weather sphere. My final exams and my fall semester is over. They are all said and done, so I'm happily able to jump back into the weather in the YouTube atmosphere, no pun intended, and start providing a little bit increased coverage as of now going forward, at least until maybe middle of January when the winter and the spring semester begins to kick off. But anyways, we have a few big things I want to talk about today. We're going to get right into it. We're starting off on our half-disc water vapor shot, and as you can see, our main area of concern is going to be this deep trough digging in along the western coastline of the United States. Currently, we're underneath a ridge, and what that's doing is allowing a lot of good warm air advection to surge into the Rockies, across the central and northern portions of the western United States for that matter, and a lot of good cross-barrier flow is already occurring over Montana and parts of Wyoming and Idaho, probably increasing surface level wind speeds in that general area as well. Across the east, however, we're looking at some pretty solid weather activity right now. We had another frontal system come through, and even as we speak, I have my window open here in my home office, letting some of the cooler air in here in the southeast and central Florida. It's been wonderful the last 24, 48 hours with those temps coming back down after a quick surge back into summer almost over this last weekend. I do have some prevalent updates to pass along with this storm system that is expected to develop across the central and southern plains, right around that general like clockwork kind of region, if you will, over the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles, maybe a little bit further to the north of that, based on our latest model information from 12 Zulu, especially looking at the GFS and the Euro. I also want to take a little bit of time to go back down into the Caribbean and across the Gulf of Mexico, because we can't forget about you guys. I know a lot of my viewers are out from that general area because of the hurricane season, and there's a little bit to talk about, and one specific interesting feature that I want to highlight real quick and kind of dispel any rumors you may be hearing. All right, first and foremost, we're starting at 300 millibars. Let's see exactly what our jet stream is doing. And as you can see with that trough I highlighted on the water vapor beginning to push into western Conus, as it transitions across the Rocky Mountains to their entirety, we are expecting some pretty good amplification or deepening of this long-range trough. However, I want to pause right here and show you a little something. So despite the fact that we have really good separation in our winds or divergent or diffluent flow at ahead of it that'll help to provide us with a little bit more low-level and mid-level instability, notice how our trough has kind of taken on a bit more of a positive tilt to it. Previously, it was looking a little bit more neutral and then eventually transitioning to more of that negative tilt as we were expecting a little bit more widespread severe weather action with it across the central and southern plains, the deep south, the Dixie Alley area, which has been under the gun for severe weather bouts, it seems like on a weekly basis at this point, transitioning through the Appalachians and towards the mid-Atlantic coastline, maybe even amplifying our severe weather down here in Florida. You can see now that we've gone back to a bit more of a positive tilt, which is a good sign. I'm not saying we can completely dispel any kind of severe weather activity with this, but the fact that we've gone from negative to a positive, or more so a neutral tilt with this trough, means that the likelihood of seeing some very, very aggressive thunderstorm activity brought on specifically by the jet is a little bit lower, a little bit more lax, and it looks like because of the orientation of this trough, our most significant activity is going to expand a little bit further to the north. As you carry this through, you can see that it does begin to take on a bit more of a neutral pose once it gets into the Great Lakes, the Midwest, down across the Gulf Coast states, approaching the southeast and across the eastern seaboard. Then, as we get towards the very tail end of this run, you see it kind of try to take on a bit of a negative orientation to it for the northeast. And that's why I do think the mid-Atlantic and the northeast particularly need to pay close attention to this, while we still have to mitigate a little bit of those severe weather impacts across the deep south and the southeast. We're going to transition all the way down to the surface level so we can kind of get an idea of where most of our significant weather phenomena is going to take place. We're starting off here underneath the ridge, and just for confirmation, you can see that we have our thickness lines, our red thickness lines running across the heart of the United States like so, and our 1022 high nestled in across the south and southeast. This is kind of the precursor to what part of the ingredients look like for our potential severe weather outbreak across the south and maybe even the central plains into the Appalachian region. This high is going to allow a lot of good maritime tropical air, modified maritime tropical air, thanks to our frontal system that just had passed through over the last couple of days, to begin to re-push back in or reform itself back across the south, giving us that really solid temperature gradient, that temperature profile we want to help with that clashing of air masses and induce the severe thunderstorm activity. As we take this through time, you can see when that model begins to show our cyclogenesis, we get a little bit of what looks to be an Alberta clipper across the northern tier, the Canadian-United States border, moving into the upper Great Lakes. Not the main area of concern. Right in through here, if you guys look, that same general source region that's been pumping pumping out low after low for quite a little bit of time now, even during the hurricane season, and thereafter we've been seeing lows originate really across the southern plains, the deep south, right across that trademark panhandle intersection of Oklahoma and Texas, almost pushing out of the southern Rockies into Four Corners. As this undergoes cyclogenesis and deepens down, notice how the model is thinking we're not going to immediately see ignition of our significant weather activity. It won't be until we get that secondary push of cold air associated by that Alberta Clipper system up across the northern tier states and the upper Midwest. And that's when we start to see that boundary reinforce itself right in through here. So yes, we do have a little bit of good return flow around our 1027 Bermuda high and a little bit of ignition, that catalyst, if you will, of the low pressure that's now pushing into the lower Great Lakes as of this panel here. This is on Saturday at 12 Zulu. Then if you watch those thickness lines closely, here's our 528 line. It may be a little difficult for you guys to pick up on, but as that dense push of polar air begins to interact with our different air mass down across the south in way of that 1029 high, that's when we really begin to see that frontal boundary situate itself. We get a really good clash of our air masses, and that's when that line of severe weather activity could possibly ignite, with that cold plunge going all the way through Texas into parts of northern Mexico. And that actually helps us to transition to what I'm going to speak on very briefly at the tail end of this video. We're also watching to see if our shortwave propagating through the pattern can help ignite yet another low pressure center across the southeast, and that's going to help to instigate a little bit of additional temperature advection across the southeast, pushing that front across the rest of the United States, through Florida for that matter, and then the mid-Atlantic states in the northeast, as I mentioned at the 300 millibar portion, is going to see that trough kind of go negatively tilted, which just overall suggests more severe weather activity. And if you guys look closely, that is where our strongest gradient is expected to take shape. We have a very, very sharp line of very aggressive potential thunderstorms occurring before we hit that rain-snow line. And amidst that, if you guys look real closely in here, there is a gradient of purple colors, and that could be some possible sleet and some freezing rain for our neighbors up there in the mid-Atlantic and the Midwest, as well as spanning all the way up through the Northeast and into parts of Quebec and maybe even New Brunswick, Newfoundland, as it continues to move off to the east, interacting with that warm air that's been entrenched across the eastern coastline of the entire United States. So still anticipating we're going to see widespread, moderate to severe impacts with this system, whether you live down along the Gulf of Mexico coastline all the way up to the eastern Canadian border of the United States and Canada for that matter. It just seems like we're going to see a bit more of an elongation in where those impacts are likely to brew up, as opposed to it being concentrated to the south and southeast like we've seen with our previous severe weather events. Now this is a phenomenal chart here. We're actually at the 700 millibar level, and this is going to be our temperature advection. The blue colors are going to highlight where we have our cold air moving through the atmosphere, and then obviously the red is going to be the warm air advection versus the cold air advection. And I think this is an excellent tool to help communicate to you guys where it is that clashing, that bare knuckle brawl between our polar air and our tropical air is going to meet up. So as we take this loop through time, you could see that we do have that first system moving its way through. I'll go ahead and draw it so you guys can see. I know we're just looking at colors and upper level wind barbs, but this would be that first low pressure moving into the lower Great Lakes we highlighted on our MSLP chart. And then up here is our Alberta Clipper system with that secondary push of cold air coming in. And notice how we already have a good gradient here, but it isn't until we get that reinforcement, you can say the cavalry has arrived via that upper level system or that upper latitude system moving through Canada. I'll clear the ink and continue on. That's when you can really see some very aggressive cold air advection right there begin to ignite as that reinforcing layer of cooler air from up north hits that secondary boundary that's just out ahead of it. I know that sounds kind of garbled, if you will, but if you imagine we have one front here pushing through, that's going to help to be the initial catalyst, and then the second one back behind it is going to give it an extra nudge. Just that little nudge is what's going to help to really kick off whatever severe weather activity we're anticipating for a lot of the aforementioned regions. What this also means is after this is all said and done, we're going to have another bout of very cool, if not cold temperatures for much of the east and southeast United States, which is good news. We just got to get through this first bout of very enhanced weather activity. Okay, so I know that the tropical season is over. We're back down across the Gulf of Mexico and into our Caribbean AOY. And the main reason is I've highlighted a little bit of an interesting phenomena that's going to happen at the tail end of that plunge that I showed you guys moving through Texas all the way down through Mexico and into the Yucatan for that matter. If you look out over the tropical Atlantic, you can see our precip action is expected to go up for our Lesser Antilles, particularly the Leeward particularly the Windward Islands, the Guyanas, and parts of northern Venezuela and the islands further thereafter. As that system moves through, it's a very weak tropical wave, It's been being sheared apart and shredded for all intents and purposes by just how much upper-level shear activity we have across the North Atlantic to its entirety. What I want you guys to pay close attention to is as that area of rainfall right in through here continues to move through the pattern following the prevailing easterlies across the tropical Atlantic and into the Caribbean Sea. As that system transitions westward, notice how we have that significant cold plunge moving across the south, the southeast, and into the Gulf of Mexico, and the tail end of the front is now positioned over El Salvador, parts of Belize, and the Yucatan. As these two meet up, we're going to have a little bit of an induced spin right there, guys, and that's what we're highlighting here and why I wanted to bring this panel up to you, because it could look a little tropical, but I'm here to tell you it's not. Don't panic, don't worry, don't sound the alarm. I've already seen a couple of other sources mentioning we could see a spin up, and that's not the case here. We will see some spinach, but mainly, guys, if you look at it from a physics standpoint, what's happening is you have that dense column of cold air coming down, interacting with what could possibly be a warm core tropical feature. As we know, tropical systems out there, regardless of if they're a wave, a disturbance, or a bona fide hurricane, are all warm core in nature because they come from the equatorial region. So as those two systems interact, they kind of bounce off of one another, and if you take your arm through a swimming pool and you splash like this, as that mass of water comes up along your arm, if you look where your fingertips are, you get little spins in the whirlpools or in the surface of the water as that water tries to retreat and fill in where that lower area of pressure or where the water has left, it's got to fill back in. So that's exactly what's going to happen here, and the only reason I bring it up is because this could definitely spell flooding for our folks in the Yucatan and Belize, and we don't need any more of that. The icon does a great job of showing this. I'm going to really quickly take this to the end of the run because there's our frontal system. You can see a little bit of a neutral point in the winds that call leading edge of the frontal system, and then our weak tropical wave right in through here. It's a little difficult to find, but it's definitely there. Trust me, guys. And as we get towards the back end, notice how we get a little bit of spinning right there. Little cyclonic curvature in our wind flow just off the coast of Nicaragua, Honduras, parts of Belize, all encompassing this general area as those areas interact. And notice it just kind of stays there and eventually fizzles out once we lose that overall interaction or the overrunning of the two systems, that dense polar air and then the tropical wave trying to hit it and clash it like this. So inevitably, because of that intersection, we're going to get a little bit of vorticity involved, and that's all that is, and it's really going to help to bring up our rain chances. I'll take you to the 12Z total precip of the Euro. You can see over the Windward Islands and parts of the coastline of the Guyanas, we are expecting some increased rainfall with it. Nothing too substantial, maybe 2 to 2.5 inches at best as that system transitions through your general region, but it won't be until we get that interaction along the Yucatan coastline where you can see some isolated pockets all the way up into maybe the 10 to 12 inch range. So we'll definitely want to keep an eye on how this kind of adjusts as we go further in time. We are looking at a probability of this taking place somewhere between the 11th to the 13th of December, and as we know, it's only December 6th, so we're probably going to see a little bit of adjustment and wiggling and wobbling with this system, as well as the intensity of that front as we go over this weekend and into next week. But all right, guys, that'll wrap up this latest segment of Weather Center Nazari. I hope things have been wonderful for you, and I do hope to see you tonight for our 8 p.m. live stream. I will be hosting it because, once again, huge sigh of relief, a huge weight off my shoulders. The current semester of my schooling is over with, so I have a lot more free time that I can allocate to you guys back again. I do apologize. I've been a little late in my videos. I just wanted to handle business behind the scenes before getting back on camera and tending to everybody, but it's great to be back. I feel such a huge relief as of finishing up and passing all my classes, so you can say we have another 12 credits going towards that weather degree. Once again, guys, thank you very much for watching. Please like and share this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, or if you're brand new and just discovering me as we transition between the United States, Canada, and the Caribbean Sea. I hope to see you tonight at our 8 p.m. live stream. We're going to be discussing all this in greater detail, as well as talking a little bit about my theories for next hurricane season 2024, and mark my words, folks,
it's going to be a dicey one.
Thank you all for watching. We'll see you again soon. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out. Dang, it feels good to say that.